There is a jar on my counter a health inspector would make me throw out, and the thing living in it is older than my truck.
I am going to give you 12 things people did in kitchens around here that the modern world told them to stop doing. Some of them were against the law. Most of them were just against the advice, which turned out to be worse because of law you can see coming. And the 12th one is the reason I made this video. A doctor put it in a paper. It kept people in these mountains from dying of something that killed 100,000 Americans, and nobody doing it had any idea that was what they were doing. My name is Burl. I am 72 years old, and I have lived in these mountains my whole life. My grandmother cooked for 7 people on a wood stove until 1963. I stood at her elbow for the first 10 years of my life, and I have spent the last 40 watching every single thing she did get called dangerous, and then watched about half of it get called brilliant again.
So we are going to go through it, what they did, why they did it, and what the people in white coats say about it now.
1. The butter stayed out on the counter, in a covered dish, on the table, all day, in August. It never saw the inside of the icebox once it was made. Every pamphlet that came through the mail after about 1960 told women that butter belonged in the refrigerator, and if you read the back of a butter box today, it still tells you that. Here's the part they left out. Salted butter is mostly fat, and there is not enough free water in it for much of anything to grow. The salt takes care of what water there is. On a counter, in a covered dish, out of the sun, salted butter keeps for days and days, and it is not close. And the reason she did it had nothing to do with science. Cold butter tears bread.
Cold butter will not cream with sugar. Cold butter is useless, and she needed it to work, so she left it where it worked.
TWO. The egg sat on a shelf, unwashed, not in the icebox. On a shelf in the pantry, dirty, with whatever was on them still on them. Now, in this country, an egg has to be washed and it has to be refrigerated. That is the rule. Go to England or France or most of Europe, and the eggs are sitting on a shelf in the store at room temperature, unrefrigerated, and nobody there is dying of it. The difference is what washing takes off. An egg comes out of the hen with a coating on the shell. It seals the pores. Wash it, and you have taken the seal off. And now the egg has to be kept cold because you removed the thing that was protecting it.
So both ways work. What does not work is doing half of each. Wash your eggs and you own the refrigerator part forever.
She never washed one till the minute before she cracked it. THRE. She let the milk go sour on purpose. A crock of milk on the back of the stove, covered with a cloth, sitting out for a day or two until it set up thick and tangy. Clabber. You ate it with a spoon and cornbread crumbled into it, or you baked with it. You cannot buy the milk to make that in most of this country now. Selling raw milk across a state line has been against federal law since 1987. And what was happening in that crock is the exact same thing that happens in a $2 cup of yogurt. Lactic acid bacteria eating the sugar in the milk, making acid, and the acid setting the protein and shutting the door on everything you would not want in there. That is the whole trick. It is why the tang tastes sharp. Sharp means the pH went down.
Down means safe. Every grocery store in America now sells that in a plastic cup with a berry printed on the lid.
EOFOUR. The starter never went in the refrigerator either. A crock of flour and water on the counter that she fed every day and never threw out. It came from her mother. Mine came from her. Every food safety leaflet in the last 50 years would tell you that a bowl of wet flour left out at room temperature is a bad idea, and for plain flour and water it would be right. But that crock is not plain. It is running at an acid of about 3.5, which is somewhere around vinegar, and it is packed shoulder to shoulder with yeast and lactobacillus that have been winning that fight for 100 years. There is no room at the table and no food left on it for anything else. That is called competitive exclusion, and there is a whole field of it now. There is a second thing it does that took science until fairly recently to work out. Grain carries a compound that grabs onto iron and zinc and carries them straight through you. A long sour rise breaks that compound down.
So the bread she made was not just easier on the stomach, it actually handed over more of the iron in the wheat.
That is a real measured difference, and she got it by being too thrifty to throw a crock away. FIV. The kraut sat in an open crock in the corner with a plate on it. shredded cabbage, salt, hands, a plate to hold it under, a rock on the plate, and then 2 months of leaving it alone in a cool corner of the cellar. Somewhere in the middle of the last century, the advice in this country turned hard toward boiling everything and sealing it in a jar, and open fermenting got a reputation as the reckless way your grandmother did it before anybody knew better. What she was doing was building a place where only one kind of thing can live. The salt pulls water out of the cabbage and makes brine. The brine covers the cabbage so no air gets to it, and the bacteria that came in on the leaves make acid until nothing else can stand it. The plate and the rock are not decoration. They are what keeps the cabbage under, and that is the entire safety of it. Sealed in a boiled jar, you get soft cabbage that keeps. In the crock, you get something alive. Those are 2 different foods, and only one of them was in her cellar. SIX. She cooked in lard, and nobody had to convince her. A can of it in the cool of the pantry, rendered off the hog in the fall. Biscuits, pie crust, greens, potatoes, everything. This one was not discouraged. It was driven out. By the 1980s, the campaign against animal fat was as loud as anything I have lived through, and American kitchens emptied the lard can and filled the shelf with the thing that replaced it. What replaced it was vegetable oil that had been run through a process to make it solid at room temperature. And the fat that process makes is the one thing in the whole argument that turned out to be genuinely, measurably bad for a human heart. It took 30 years to prove it, and the government finally made it illegal to put in food. I am not being clever.
So the fat she used is legal, and the fat they replaced it with is banned. That is just the order it happened in.
7. She drank the water the greens cooked in. Pot liquor. You cook a mess of greens down with a piece of meat, and the dark liquid in the bottom of the pot is not waste. It is the point. You sop cornbread in it. Every cooking column for 2 generations said to drain your vegetables. That is still what most people do standing at the sink. Here is what is in the sink when you do that. The vitamins in a green leaf that dissolve in water do not stay in the leaf when you boil it. Vitamin C goes, the folate goes, a good part of the B vitamins go, and the minerals go with them. They are all in that pot. Pour it off and you have cooked the vegetable and then thrown away a measurable share of the reason you cooked it. She was not being frugal. She was drinking the vitamins, and she found out by tasting. EIGHT. The bones went back in the pot for 2 days. Not an hour. 2 days on the back of the stove, with the lid cocked on the lowest heat the stove would hold. Ham bones, chicken bones, beef bones, whatever the week gave her. For most of my life, that was the mark of a family that could not afford meat. You did not admit to it. There is a jar of it in a health food store 2 towns over for $11. What is in it is what was always in it. The connective tissue on a bone turns into gelatin when you hold it wet and warm for long enough, and that is why real broth goes solid in a cold pantry and the boxed kind stays as thin as water. That is also the test.
If it does not set up cold, nothing came out of the bone. Long and low and covered. 2 days is not stubbornness.
2 days is how long it takes. N-I-ing. Everything acid got cooked in bare iron on purpose. Tomatoes, apples, greens with vinegar in them, all of it in the black skillet, as she never once worried about the metal. The worry came later, when metal in food became a thing to be afraid of in general. I have heard people say cast iron is unsafe for tomatoes with a straight base. Iron does come off the pan into acidic food. That is true, and it is measured.
It is also the thing a great many people are short of, and it is the same iron that is in the pill at the pharmacy.
There are aid programs in poor parts of the world right now that hand out a lump of iron to drop in the cooking pot for exactly this reason, and they can show you the blood counts before and after. A family that cooked everything in bare iron over a wood fire was dosing itself daily with the one mineral that farm women ran short of most. TEN. The meat hung in the smokehouse all winter with no cold at all. Hams and shoulders, salted heavy, hung in the dark in a little building with a smoldering fire in it and eaten in July. Curing salt got a bad name in the 1970s, and it has never fully got it back. Read a package of bacon today, and half of them say uncured on the front, like a virtue. Turn that package over. The uncured ones are cured with celery powder, and what is doing the work in celery powder is the same nitrate. It is the identical chemical, and it is doing the identical job, which is stopping the one bacterium that can kill you out of a piece of preserved meat before it ever gets started. She salted a ham to keep the family alive through a winter with no electricity in the house. It worked every year. The label on the store shelf is arguing about a word. E.L.11. The turnips and the cabbage spent the winter buried in the ground. Not in the cellar, in the ground. A pit dug below the frost, lined with straw, filled with root crops and cabbage heads, covered over with straw and then dirt with a plug of hay for a door. There is no version of a modern food safety rule that has a place for that. The ground 4 feet down does not freeze and it does not get warm. It sits just above freezing and it stays wet, and just above freezing and damp is exactly what a turnip wants. A root crop is still alive after you pull it. It is still breathing slowly, and cold slows the breathing down. Dry air is what ruins it, and dirt does not let air move.
That pit held better than the refrigerator I have now, and it did it in 1930 with no wire running to it.
TWL. And this is the one. She burned hardwood down to white ash, poured water through it, and cooked field corn in the water that came out. That is how you make hominy. The ash water is lye. You cook the dry corn in it until the skins slip off. Then you wash it and wash it and wash it, and what you have left is hominy, and you dry some and grind it into grits. Now, every generation of official advice on cooking has treated putting wood ash in your food as the definition of the ignorant past. It is not something you will find in a cookbook printed after the war. In the early 1900s, there was a disease going through the American South that nobody could explain. Skin that cracked open in the sun, guts that would not hold anything, and at the end of it, people losing their minds. It killed on the order of 100,000 Americans, and it was in the South, and it was in the mill towns and the tenant farms. They were sure it was catching. They built hospitals for it and kept people apart. A doctor named Goldberger proved it was not catching. It was the food. It was corn, in places where corn was nearly all there was to eat. And here's the part that is the reason for this whole video. Corn has the vitamin in it. It has always had it. But in plain corn, that vitamin is locked to the grain in a way a human gut cannot open, so you can eat cornbread 3 times a day and starve for it anyway. Cook the corn in ash water first, and the alkali breaks that lock. The vitamin comes free. That is all it takes. People in Mexico had been doing that with lime for thousands of years, and nobody down there got that disease. And the families in these mountains and hollers who still made their own hominy in ash lye, the ones who had not switched over to buying the germinated cornmeal from the store, were doing the identical chemistry.
They did not know why. Not one of them could have told you what a vitamin was. My great-grandmother could not read.
She was doing food chemistry that the world would not understand for another 30 years, standing over a pot in the yard, because that is how her mother taught her to make hominy. That is the one they call genius, and the word is not mine. It is in the literature. So that is the 12. I want to say the honest thing at the end of it, because I do not want to be one of these people who says everything old was right. Everything old was not right. There are things my grandmother did that were dangerous, and I am not going to defend them, and there are people alive today because the rules got written. But here is what I have watched happen for 72 years. Advice comes down from a long way off, aimed at everybody, and it lands on a family that has been doing a thing for 4 generations for a reason nobody wrote down. The advice is not wrong exactly. It just does not know what it is talking to. And when the science finally catches up, it usually does not find superstition down there. It finds somebody who was paying very close attention with no instrument but their hands. Tell me which one of these your family did.
And tell me if I left one out, because there are 100 and I got 12. I read every one of them. Come see me.